Well, hey, best friend. I am so glad that you are listening today. I brought another one of my friends along for the party because I think that you need to know amazing people. And since we're all just, hanging around on the couch together, I hope you grabbed your coffee or your tea or your warm blanket or whatever it is that you like to listen to, like to have while you're listening. I hope that you did that. So I'm really excited about this topic in particular because my listeners are predominantly women, which is as intended. And a lot of women are also mamas. And a lot of mamas, don't feel like being a mama is sunshine and rainbows and unicorns pooping butterflies all the time. And so I have Dr. Olivia Wedel with us today. And she is a professional counselor like me, but she is also certified in perinatal mental health. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today is like, what happens after those little people show up and really how our bodies and our mental health are impacted as a result. And many of you know because I keep talking about it also that I'm in this infertility process. I've done IVF, getting ready for transfer, and I am on a bazillion amount of drugs. And I can't even tell you how different my own mental health is, or even having to recognize, wow, my patience is really low today. And so recognizing the way, because I haven't given birth, but me even going, wow, hormones are still impacting my everyday life. So without further ado, I just want you to meet Olivia and we're going to get going. Olivia, thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I met Olivia a while ago when we were teaching at the same institution, and we were buddies. And I was so grateful for her because I don't know. Some days I don't know that I would have made it through without an Olivia in my corner.
I agree. I
So,
wouldn't have made it without Brittany.
mm, no, I'm so grateful. So, Olivia, can you just to kind of kick us off? Can you even kind of talk about why this topic matters or and what some of the things moms experience after birth?
Absolutely. And it's something that I feel very strongly about women and families having this information because I believe this is a type of knowledge that it can save lives. It can really save lives. And I think we are doing an injustice to especially new parents, but also maybe those families that it's their second, third, or even fourth child, and it's the first time that the mom is struggling with postpartum mental health issues. So
Hmm.
I came into this work full transparency because I had an extremely difficult postpartum experience. My son was born on March 27th, 2020. And if you think back 3 years, that was right around the onset of COVID. When things started, Texas was a little later closing things down and things like that, but it was the same week that hospital visitors were no longer allowed. And we had to transfer from a birth center to the hospital. Thankfully, my husband was allowed to go with me, but nothing could have prepared me for what was to come because I had your textbook, quote, perfect,
Yeah.
uncomplicated pregnancy. I was healthy. I was happy. I did not anticipate or even know what was to come with my really difficult postpartum experience. So, through my own journey with healing and education, and then my brain is a little research minded, as I know you know, I decided that helping women and families be more prepared was something that I really wanted to do professionally. So, I shifted gears after a much extended maternity leave and decided to focus specifically on working with women and with that primarily moms, so
Hmm.
that we could plan and support and have some education and awareness so that more people are not caught off guard like I was.
Yeah, I actually think, at least in my experience working with some postpartum mamas, that they're like, no one told me.
Yes.
No one told me how awful that I was going to feel. And by the way, as I say this, my brain's just cueing me to go like, not everybody's experience. Not everybody has
Yes, that is
postpartum.
true.
Sometimes it is rainbows and unicorns. They're
Yes.
tired, but it is really great and
Hmm.
everything functions how it was intended. And that is some people's experience. But
Yes.
I have worked, and Olivia and I are in mental health. So, of course, we're going to have people coming in with mental health struggles. Those who
Yes.
are not having those are not going to make
They're
their
not
way
come
to
see
us.
us.
So I just want to be clear about that you are hearing that perspective. But so many of those mamas are like, I just had no idea. I
Hmm.
had no idea.
Yes.
And a lot of times, and I know you can speak to this, a lot of times in our field, when people think about postpartum issues, they think about postpartum depression.
Hmm.
But what I actually see more than postpartum depression is postpartum anxiety
Me
and
too.
sometimes even postpartum like rage, anger
Yes.
rage.
Yes.
Can you talk about that,
Yeah,
Olivia?
yeah. I think it's important too. I like that you mentioned that because it is important to point out the distinction. PPD or postpartum depression is the one that is usually talked about the most. But like you said, I see much more, a much larger presentation of postpartum anxiety than postpartum depression. With postpartum anxiety left untreated, it can become postpartum OCD. Postpartum depression can manifest as postpartum rage, and I'll speak to that in just a few minutes. Then we also have some of the um, lesser known but not rare needs around postpartum psychosis, postpartum PTSD, and postpartum bipolar. So, those are other presentations of postpartum mental health struggles. The mom rage, as we call it, and I know there's a lot of satirical stuff about mom rage on social media in particular, but what I really think it is just looking at the bigger systemic influence of our society. We live in a world, well, especially Western society, United States. When I say world,
Hmm.
that's very unsupportive and really unforgiving of resting and not supportive of families and taking a step back and doing what you need to do to heal and recover. So when I have a mom that I'm either working with either through therapy or through consulting and support for their family, it's almost always conversations around unmet expectations.
Hmm.
I didn't know that I, I thought we need a village, but we don't have a
Yeah.
village. Families live much more spread out now, and people are busier. And it's not uncommon that a mom has to go back to work at 6 to 8 weeks when her body isn't even physically healed, much less mentally. There's still a lot going on. So, but there's always, I have never seen mom rage not overlap in some form or fashion with postpartum depression. And it's almost always, once we start peeling back some of the layers, it's like a lot of unmet expectations. It's
Hmm.
not anger towards the baby. I do want to clarify that. It's not the type of situation like you would see with postpartum psychosis that might result in harm. Mom rage is usually very much internal. And I think it's a direct reaction to just a society that's unsupportive of families and has these huge expectations for moms. And then in turn, it leaves mom feeling stressed out and overwhelmed and questioning, like, what am I doing here? you know?
Hmm. Yeah, there's so much to that. So much struggle.
Hmm.
And again, it's like something that you said that was so important was unmet expectations.
Yes.
How do like how do these
Hmm.
moms arrive at these
Hmm.
expectations?
Hmm.
What are they?
I think one of the big ones that I hear, and again, this is speaking from my work experience with this population over the last 3 years, but also just from research and conversations in the community and things like that, the expectation that we should do it all and be it all and bounce back. That's one of the things that is really rampant on social media. That a picture perfect nursery. How quickly you bounce back and fit into your pre-pregnancy genes, but nobody's really talking about, like, how's your brain feeling. Yeah, you
Hmm.
might fit into your pre-pregnancy genes, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But how are you feeling mentally. Unmet expectations, some other things that can come up is like it forces parents in the home to look at division of responsibilities differently.
Yeah.
It leads to conversations that maybe families aren't prepared to have around necessary boundaries with grandparents that they didn't anticipate having. And I mean, even when grandparents are supportive, sometimes there still needs to be some boundaries in place around visiting and having safe sleep spaces, and things like that. So these are all conversations that we are not having during pregnancy because so much focus is on maybe a nursery, which again, nothing wrong with that, but a nursery and your birth plan. And we're not really talking about postpartum. And so that's why I'm just like, we have to change the narrative here.
I kind of think about it like when people when they first get married and they're so focused on the wedding and all of the things, and they don't actually really think about, all right, holy smokes, we're actually going to be together. I
All
mean,
the
you marry
time.
someone for the foreseeable future, for forever, I think is the intent. People don't get married to get divorced, I think.
Right.
So,
Right.
um, I think about it a lot like that, where people are really preparing for the pregnancy itself or the baby, but not actually going, well, what am I going to need afterwards? What could happen, or what might I expect, or like what conversations do I need to be
Hmm.
having? And then something that happened to me, I didn't really realize it. I'm going to use honeymoon life. I was a counselor when I got married, so I thought my husband and I had talked about like every single expectation that we could ever possibly have. And then I got married, and then I realized that there were others that we didn't talk about because I didn't even think to talk about them.
Hmm.
And I know that that happens to mamas, is
Yes.
these
Hmm.
boundaries and divisions of responsibilities and what your
Yes.
body is doing and all the expectations surrounding that.
Yes.
I actually am just wondering aloud with you, Olivia,
Yeah.
if some of the mamas that might struggle, and I don't know, this isn't my area of expertise, so, but I find myself wondering if some of the mamas that might struggle with expectations are the ones that hold themselves to really
Hmm.
high
Hmm.
expectations and standards ahead of
Yes.
time.
Yes. I think so, and I think that, well, I know that is where the postpartum anxiety can creep in, because again, largely because of ideas that are manifested through society about having a clean house and cooking
Totally.
cooking homemade meals and all of those things. It leaves moms feeling like that they're running a rat race instead of just being able to have some time to sit and connect with their kiddo. It's sort of like that
Yeah.
saying, sleep when the baby sleeps. That can be terrible advice without context. But again, it's just speaking to, if we do feel like, it's really retraining your brain and giving yourself permission to rest, take a step back, take it easy. Um,
Hmm.
Becoming okay with the fact that maybe your house isn't going to be clean all the time. And maybe you do have some homemade meals a few days a week, but you might order from Panera or McAllister's or somewhere else like that another day. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of it, I think that's a great point that you make. It's like we have to learn how to forgive ourselves for not doing all of the things.
Hmm.
And, if that means in turn that we can take a nap with our kiddo a few times a week, or we can take a walk outside with little one in the stroller or baby wear or something like that, that in turn is really relaxing to the central nervous system when we get to the place of allowing ourselves to do it. But yeah, moms, we hold ourselves very much to the highest expectations, I think. And it can be really hard to reconcile when we're not always okay in that regard.
I keep hearing you use this word, and I actually love this word
Mhm.
because it implies that we have control,
Yeah.
which is allow,
Hmm.
that we
Allow.
allow ourselves, we give ourselves the space, the freedom, the freedom to like have our house a mess, the
Hmm.
freedom to take a nap, the freedom to whatever.
Yes, absolutely. Allow is exactly what it is. Like if I turn my computer around, for example, I have a stack of unfolded laundry over there in the chair, and my little boy has some toys here in the floor just to the right. So I realized not as soon as I should have, again, because like you mentioned, I did not have any preparation or awareness around what I needed to do for my mental health after having a baby. So I finally, just through doing some of my own research online and looking at some of the less stressful social media accounts around motherhood, I came to terms with, okay, when my son takes a nap in the afternoon, I'm going to nap with him because I feel better when I do. Now, I was not
Yeah.
able to do that every day, granted. And the fact that I did, my maternity leave was much longer than anticipated because it was 2020. And so my maternity leave was almost like 15 months. And I know that's not reality for the majority of people who give birth, but it's like allowing yourself, but then also forgiving yourself for not meeting all of these expectations that are either
Hmm.
societal or cultural or that we hold ourselves to.
Yeah, I'm gonna link this to a previous podcast. Had one of my friends, Dr. Krista Kirk, on,
Yes.
and we were talking about parenting and special
Mm-hmm.
needs, and she was like, sometimes you just have to give yourself permission to be a quote unquote like bad mom, because
Yes.
the other times you're killing it and you're a really good mom, but right now you just need to not be the best mom, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
It is okay. It is okay. Yes. Yeah. And I think every family will, and I really enjoyed her podcast, by the way. I
Hmm.
think every family, and especially moms, will have their own non negotiables because I've heard the flip side where, well, if I don't fold this load of laundry, then I'm going to be anxious about the living room being messy. Or if I don't do such and such, fill in the blank, then I'm going to be anxious. And so in the work that I do, it's like, well, we need to pick your non-negotiables. Like for me, for example, I do like to have all of the dishes washed before I go to bed at night. That was ingrained in me from childhood from my mom. It's like no matter what the rest of the house looks like, at least have a clean kitchen for when you go in the next morning. So that's a non-negotiable for me. But I don't stress if I have a load of laundry on the couch or a load of laundry over here in the chair. Like we'll fold it. It might be a day or two, but it's not a non-negotiable.
Yeah, you'll get to it.
You'll get to it.
Yeah, my house currently does not look, and I'm not in postpartum life, but my
Yeah.
house currently does not look how I would deem presentable, but it is livable
Yes.
currently.
Hmm.
And then it gets presentable
Yes.
for maybe 8 hours if I'm lucky, because
Yes.
4-year-olds are nanners.
Oh yeah, they are. Yes.
Hmm.
So are 3-year-olds.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes, they are.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
even as we're talking about this, I'm going, all right, what are some of those things, Olivia, that
Hmm.
mamas really need to be on the lookout for?
Be on the lookout for? Yes, that's a great question too. I think first of all, just knowing that when these thoughts start to creep in, or if anything feels off, especially longer than say 2 to 3 weeks after giving birth, 1 in 7 moms, and there's actually some research coming out to suggest it's actually 1 in 5 moms will
Wow.
suffer from postpartum depression or anxiety, and 1 in 10 dads. So I think one of the main things that can be done is have, even though obstetrical providers are not trained in mental health, start those conversations early. You could ask them to screen you during pregnancy, although we have no universal screening measures, which is really sad, but we have no universal screening measures for perinatal mood or anxiety disorders, either during pregnancy or postpartum. So, if you are, for example, if you already have a diagnosis of depression or bipolar or um, anxiety, any of those things, and even if you don't have a diagnosis, but you know that you struggle with anxiety, for example, pay attention to that because that does increase the likelihood of you being affected in the postpartum time frame. Now, again, it's not a guarantee, like because you deal with anxiety now, you're going to struggle postpartum. It's not a guarantee. That's where this perinatal mental health can get really tricky. I would also say do some postpartum planning. Include mental health in your birth plan and talk to your provider about it. A lot of times, though, I've been hearing from moms that providers will sort of just brush moms off. I had an OB. I'm not going to say any names, but I had an obstetrical provider tell me a while back that I was just spreading doom and gloom by talking about postpartum mental health.
What?
I was like, well, let's, I said, I'm actually sharing this in hopes of saving lives. I said, because I would rather have one mom out of many hear this and be able to access the help, or at least know they're not alone, than to not share this at all and have many people, I said, if it helps just one. So then that sort of led to an interesting conversation. And the OB said, well, even if somebody did tell us that they're struggling, we don't know what to do with that. So I think that speaks to a bigger,
Your
not to go
problem?
too far into system stuff, but
Yeah.
I think it speaks to something bigger because, like insurance doesn't pay for screening. The majority of providers do not screen. So moms don't know to have these conversations
Hmm.
before they have their
Yeah.
baby. So
So
it's just,
they really have to be, it's like other moms really looking out for moms going, hey, I hope that you never experience this. I
yes,
hope that, again, that you're tired, but it's like rainbows and unicorns after you birth a
yes.
baby. Like, I hope that that is your experience. In the event that it's not, in the event that you have these very anxious thoughts or you're finding yourself angry all the time or
Hmm.
like you just want to sleep or you don't want to do anything at all or you're having these like thoughts about harming your baby, like I just want you to know like that's normal, but also please tell me so I can help you find help. Like moms
Hmm.
have to look out for other moms.
Yes, yes. Moms do have to look out for other moms. And that's where the conversations are likely to happen. It's not necessarily in an obstetrical provider's office. For example, the OB that delivered my son never screened me, even at my 6 week checkup. It was my son's pediatrician that screened me for postpartum depression, but gave no context around the screening. And at 6 weeks, are we really we're still very much in that fourth trimester where we're still reeling and adjusting to everything that has happened. So it was really hard for me to be honest on that screening because there was no context given. And then, with as much honesty as I did include, then I worried for weeks afterward that CPS would show up and take Elijah because I admitted
Mm,
that I was struggling. So, and I hear that a lot in my practice, again, not just from clients, but from consultations and community events and things like that, that when women are screened, because there's no context given around, hey, this is not a diagnosis, this is a baseline. This is a baseline, and we can have a conversation about getting you some help. Usually, what happens is they're given the screening, it's filed in their chart, and it's never discussed.
hmm.
So just that again speaks to some of the bigger systemic systemic issues around
Yeah.
maternal mental health in the United States. So,
Yeah. Wow.
hmm,
I'm listening to you say this, and as you know, I've never given birth to a baby. So I'm going, that is mind blowing to me,
yeah,
going,
it is.
doctors are not actually screening because
Right,
this is a big deal.
right. It is a big deal. It's a
I
big
remember
deal.
someone that was very close to me was dealing with postpartum, and I was like, you need to call your OB today. And
Hmm.
her OB did a great job. I was
Hmm.
like, you need to call your OB today, and you need
Yes.
to have a conversation about this. And
Hmm.
this person, she even got on medication for a little bit just to
Yeah.
feel better, just
Hmm.
to do what she could. And she went to therapy for a little bit and, had people help her, and that really made a big difference for her.
Yes. Yes. It does make a huge difference. And some OBs are wonderful, and some midwives are too, around, okay, we need to get you some, get you a plan of care in place here. But for all of the ones that are wonderful, I hear stories of the exact opposite,
Opposite.
you know,
Yeah,
where their women will share and then like their concerns are minimized or completely invalidated, or they feel shame for even bringing it up, even bringing it
sure.
up in the first place. So,
Well, I think culturally, we live, you alluded to it earlier, but it's kind of like we live in the land of the need to be a super mom.
yes,
And
yes.
like super moms, I mean, they kind of exist, but they also don't, at least the perfect super mom doesn't exist. And,
Exactly.
I have people see all that I do from have practice to teach to,
Mhm.
be married and have a child and
Yes.
serve at our church and all these things. And people
Yes.
are like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know how you do it all." And a lot of times I'll go, "Well, I'm not really sure I'm doing it all well." Just so we're clear.
Yes.
Because I think it's easy to see people look at whoever it is, a person on
Mhm.
Instagram or a mom
Yes.
that we know or what, and they're like, "Geez, like you make all the things off of Pinterest.
Yeah.
You are a hero." I
Yes.
think those moms are heroes. You make
I
all
think
the
they
things
are
off
too.
Pinterest, you are a hero.
Yes.
But
Yes.
we can easily look at that and compare and say, "Oh,
Mhm.
I'm missing. I'm
Yes.
missing."
Or I'm failing. I'm failing.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, Olivia, when we're thinking about, all right, we know what mamas need to be looking for in
Yes.
terms of dealing with some of these things. You talked about expectations, missed
Mhm.
expectations. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about like the role of like sleep
Absolutely.
in
Yeah.
these things.
Yes, absolutely. Sleep is when you were talking about how our society values things. This our society very much, I think, our worth is determined on our productivity. Um, so I think it should be the exact opposite when it comes to motherhood and parenthood. It's like how much you allow yourself to rest should earn a lot of gold stars, because that's the if we look I have a picture that I have in my office of the postpartum hierarchy of needs, and before
Hmm.
we start working on anything else we look at the very bottom, and nutrition and sleep are two of the biggest things.
Yeah.
So when I do, because the irony of giving birth and becoming a parent is, yes, you do need sleep and you need to do things for you to rest and recover, but you're also entirely responsible for this tiny little human who's 100% dependent on you. And there
Yeah.
can be some contradicting, stressful thoughts around that. But whenever I'm working with a family on postpartum planning, what I say, especially for the first 2 weeks, and ideally for the first 6 to 8 weeks in that fourth trimester, have a plan for food and have a plan for sleep. So, for example, if it's a mama who has decided to breastfeed and do exclusively breastfeeding, like your sleep is going to be automatically compromised. So, we need to have a
Hmm.
plan where you can, somebody that you love and trust, it might be husband, it might be mother in law, it might be mom, it might be an adult sibling, somebody that you trust needs to be with you some at nighttime as much as possible. For us, because of COVID limitations, we didn't have family that could come to help. So we hired a postpartum doula, and she was amazing, and I still think she saved my life to this day. We hired a postpartum doula to come and help us overnight, occasionally, just because we had I felt my brain chemistry changing. I don't know if that makes sense, but we had to do something to get
Yeah.
some sleep. So, and then during the day, I sort of have a love hate relationship with that phrase, sleep when the baby sleeps, because I know it is not a statement that is true 100% of the time in every situation. But if
Sure.
you can, especially in that fourth trimester, or at least 6 to 8 weeks, allow yourself to rest as much as possible, walk as much as possible, get outside, get sunshine. If you're connected with a church, have them do a meal train where somebody is bringing at least one hot home cooked meal to your house a day. We had an abundance of DoorDash gift cards, which actually worked out really well, but we still had people that would bring food and leave it on our porch. Because again, I had no idea that I wouldn't feel like cooking dinner. My
Yeah.
husband cooked breakfast for us, and that was very helpful. He saw to it that we ate breakfast, but food and sleep, and then too, I would say, having normal expectation, or I don't know if normal is the best word. You can tell me what you think, but having some realistic expectations around infant sleep.
Yeah.
A 2 week old is not supposed to sleep 12 hours at night.
Nope.
There are women who are convinced that they are failing because their 2 week old is not sleeping. at nighttime.
Man, you're lucky
Um,
if you get 3 hour stretches, I
yeah.
think. So, like, if
Yes.
you get
Yes.
3 hours, you are winning.
Yes.
But
Yes.
your baby
Yeah.
also has to be big enough to be able to like they have to weigh
Exactly.
enough to be able to sustain
Yes,
that.
yes, yes. So feeding, and then even if you don't do exclusively breastfeeding, like if you're doing partial breastfeeding with, you know, doing breast milk through a bottle so that somebody else can feed baby at nighttime, or if you're supplementing with formula, or if you're doing primarily formula, whatever you're doing for feeding, especially in that first 6 to 8 weeks, I would say even the first 3 months, your sleep is going to be interrupted,
Mm.
and there's just no way to avoid
So,
that, but that's why you should have a plan. Have a
yeah,
plan.
I'm gonna tell on myself. So we um adopted my daughter.
Mhm,
And you have no, not that you can, I guess you can have more control over timing. You can
mhm,
with babies that come from your own personal body. But my husband had a trip planned to go with his men's group to the Grand Canyon um, a month, I think, after my daughter was born. We already had it already all paid for, all the
mhm,
things. And so he was incredibly helpful for me, but we decided that he was going to go. It may have been two months, but honestly, 1 month, 2 months,
Oh,
neither here
yeah,
nor
it's all a
there.
blur.
And one night, Talia would just not stop crying. I don't know what it was. She just
Mhm,
cried all night. And I remember this is there's a part of me that's like feels guilty telling this, but I also know like this is real life and I have shared this
yes.
story. Um, that I like imagined throwing her against a wall
Mhm, mhm,
just like
yep,
for her to stop crying. And
mhm,
that thought terrified me
yes,
because I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrific.
yes.
And I would never ever
Don't do
do
that.
that.
Mhm,
Ever. I
yeah,
would never do that.
mhm,
But because I was so tired and I needed
yes,
sleep so much, like it had been like a stretch of not sleeping.
mhm,
So, yeah, to think about like, and I didn't have all the hormone stuff
mhm,
going on because she didn't come from my body. And
right,
so recognizing, even I say that to say like sleep is so
mhm,
pivotal. Sleep
yes,
is so pivotal.
yes,
And I know that there are women like that was a one time for me, that was a one
mhm,
time thought that was still very
yes,
scary.
yeah,
And like it was like I want this baby, like I wanted this baby. I
yes,
fought to have this
to have
baby.
this
And
baby.
to imagine throwing her against a wall is
Mhm,
like
yeah,
terrible.
yeah, yeah,
And and so I go, but I know that there are mamas that have
mhm,
thought about that way
yeah,
more than once. And
intrusive
then
thought.
they're carrying, yep, and then they're carrying around the guilt and the
Mhm,
shame of like, what's wrong with me that I would
yes,
think this? And I know that you hear
yes,
that. Can you talk some about those
mhm.
intrusive thoughts?
Yeah, and the intrusive thoughts at nighttime are very, very common just because they can really manifest in an overcharged brain, and so when you factor in maybe some anxiety, not sleeping, maybe nutrition being compromised, all those things that can happen, especially in the first few months. Yeah, I have heard. I don't have a number, but I have heard multiple moms through the years say that exact thing, like during the night when you're so exhausted, like you just have that. And it is, that's what it's called. It's an intrusive thought. It's not based in reality. It's not based in something that you actually want to do or that you would do. But you are just so sleep deprived and upset and stressed out in those moments that that thought pops into your head about doing something like that. I had the exact same thought when my son was probably, I don't know, it's probably between 3 and 4 months old, when he was still waking really, really frequently. But I was like, I feel like I'm going to die if I don't if I don't sleep. So, and
Mm-hmm.
I was honest with my husband about it. I said I thought about just like throwing Elijah across the room last night, and that's still, I could just cry my eyes out right now thinking about that. But it was because I was honest with my husband. He was like, okay, well, we've got to do something different. So we started rotating where one of us could sleep in the other room and get some other, because we did supervised sleep, so where one of us could get some uninterrupted sleep. And I saw a major shift in my mental health
Yeah, I can
after that.
imagine.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
We had to put Talia slept in our room for the first 3 months, and I
Mm-hmm.
had to put I we ended up having to put her bassinet on the other side, like on my
Mm-hmm.
husband's side, because he can
Yes.
sleep through anything. But
Yes.
every noise, every coo, every
Yeah.
whatever, I
Woke
was
you
like,
up.
oh my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
she okay? She's okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everything's good.
Yeah.
Or just hearing her stir would stir me,
Yes.
even if I
Yeah.
wasn't concerned that something was wrong.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. New babies, that's something else that a lot of parents aren't told. New babies are extremely noisy sleepers because
Hmm.
they are adjusting to life outside of the womb and noises and sounds and textures and so much. And during that time, their circadian rhythm isn't established yet. So they are very noisy, noisy sleepers. Till
Yes.
I would say, they can settle down usually by 3 months or so, but even then they can still be noisier sleepers. So, yeah.
What are the biggest things that you would say to help empower those
Hmm.
mamas um, to take care of themselves, to
Yeah.
to get through this, that it's not a forever? Like, what would you
Hmm.
say to those mamas struggling?
Yeah. One of the first things I would say is something that one of my cousins told me. Again, I think it was maybe 6 months postpartum or so, but she told me, and I had posted something random on Instagram, and she replied and she said about not feeling like myself. And she replied and she said, give yourself a year or maybe 2 years. And she's a mom that has three little ones, back to back. She was like, just give yourself time. Don't feel like that this is a race. That has always stayed with me. I've never forgotten it, and I've told multiple moms that since then. And then I would also say when you do get to the place of where you're feeling like maybe your head's above water a little more and you're starting to feel a lot better, um, the new normal that you come to, which I think normal is so overrated, but the new normal that you get to is not going to be who you were before you had a baby.
Yeah.
That person is no more. You're a new person, a new mom. So, and then I would also say, as far as empowerment, just even if somebody is struggling and they never reach out for help, I hope they hear things like this podcast, or maybe they know about the National Maternal Mental Health Hotline, or they Google some, there are some supportive resources online so that they know they are not alone. Again, think
Mm.
about your women's group at church, or think about maybe when you go to a play date at the park. 1 in 5 women are also struggling. Um, so we're not alone. It's just still heavily stigmatized and it's not talked about. But I'm very much working to change that, and I know others are too. So,
Yeah, I love that. I
hmm
love that I love that you recognize a problem and then you start taking action on the problem,
yes,
which
yes.
is one of the reasons you were just the right person to have
Thank
on my
you.
podcast anyways, because I'm so about
Yeah.
taking action. And each of us have different calls and purposes in our
Hmm.
life, or
Yes.
a lot of times we experience something and we're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea that
Hmm.
this needed to be addressed or this needed help.
Right.
Um, so yeah, just amazing to think about giving yourself time,
Hmm.
really allowing yourself to have time. This is
Yeah.
something, again, in our culture that we don't do enough,
Mm-mm, we
is to
don't.
give ourselves time. I actually have to schedule it in my calendar, real
Me
talk.
too.
I
Yeah.
see, I have to put it in my calendar to make
Mhm.
sure that I do it, because I'm like, all right, I'm not going to cancel on a client, so I need to not cancel on myself.
Exactly. Yes.
Hmm.
I
And
do
one of the
I do the
ways
exact same thing.
I love that. One of the ways that I rest is by painting.
Hmm. I've
To
seen your
turn off my
painting. It's
mind. Yeah,
beautiful.
thanks.
Hmm.
Turn off my mind and just really are very in my body.
Yeah.
And sometimes I sit and I get in a show hole, but I really just like to give my brain
Hmm.
even a different kind of rest.
Yes. Yeah, that kind of rest, it really is. It's so important. And I think that too, if we can come to terms with the fact that not sometimes we do have moments that are just sheer joy and happiness and things like that. But if we're not enjoying every moment, that's okay too. That's okay too. Parenting is hard. Parenting is just hard. And I think even sometimes when we can do all that we know to do to prepare for it, there are still things that catch us off guard. So just recognizing that it's hard.
Hmm.
You probably are not going to enjoy every minute, but you can still have moments of joy and happiness and exhilarating peace and things like that. It doesn't have to be either or. You can experience both. And you
For
probably will
sure.
experience both.
Well, and I think sort of as I like start to kind of like wrap us, I think a big part of that is where you focus. If
Hmm.
you give your missed expectations all the ways that your body doesn't look like it's supposed to, or
Yes.
people haven't shown up for you in the way that you think that they should have,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
whatever it is, if those are the things that we focus on, those are the things that grow
Oh, yeah. Yes.
versus if we focus on the things that are good, if we focus on rest, if we focus on all of those things,
Hmm.
then we really get we help our attention go to a place
Yes.
that's going to heal us and bring joy rather
Oh, yes.
than is going to continue to rob us of
Oh,
joy.
yes, absolutely. And I would say with that, don't feel ashamed about reaching out for therapy if you want to go to therapy. I
Absolutely.
did. I mean, I'm a licensed therapist, and I saw a postpartum mental health counselor for off and on for almost a year. I also took medication for a period of time. I needed it. I'm not on it now, full transparency, but I took medication for a while, and it's like you have to come to terms with I need to do some things for me um,
Yeah.
to get better and to feel better so that I am a better
Hmm.
mom.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we all need that. And
Hmm.
honestly, I think the best counselors are the ones that seek help
Me
themselves.
too. Me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want before we just hop off, I want to leave our listeners with a couple of questions.
Hmm.
So, and these apply to all people. There will be some that are just kind of postpartum specific, but the first question is, what do you need to give yourself time on? I loved that nugget. What do you need to give yourself time on? Second, what expectations do you need to adjust in your life? So many of us live with unrealistic expectations of what it is that we need to be able to do, to provide, to whatever. So, what expectations do you need to adjust? Three, when would now be the right time to schedule rest in your life?
Hmm.
And then finally, if you have friends who are in a postpartum phase, check in on them. When is now the right time to check in on them? And if you are in that postpartum phase, this isn't really a question, it's more of an encouragement, but to encourage you really to make sure that you have people in your life that you are checking in with and being transparent with, because you need to not do this alone. You are not alone. Um, and I am going to link Olivia's details in our show notes. So if you are dealing with this, if you're in the Texas area and dealing with this, or you know somebody who is, that you can refer to her because she knows what's up and she knows her stuff. And
Hmm.
we need people, we truly do need licensed clinicians that
Hmm.
know, that truly know how to address these things.
Yes.
So, Olivia, thank you for hanging out with me
Thank
today.
you. I loved it. This was the best way to start the day. Thank you so much.
Yay! Well, I'm so glad that we got to hang
Yeah.
out. It was really great
Yes.
to see your face. It's been too
Yes.
long.
I know. Now we need to schedule some time in person.
I'm
That's what
in.
I was thinking about.
I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
anyways, thank you again. I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
stop recording in just a
Yes.
second and then, ooh, let me just do that.